If they're all set. We'll call the 3 December meeting of the Manhattan City Commission to order, and if you'll please rise and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is the first meeting of the month, and as you may know, this is time for public comment. So anyone wishing to make a public comment on any item that's not on the consent agenda or the general agenda is free to come forward. We'd love to hear from you. All we'd ask you to do is state your name and address and then write that on the paper there on the podium, and we'll give you 5 minutes to say whatever you'd like to say.
See if I can read this. In the meantime, my name is Vincent Tracy, 304 Knoxbury Drive, here in Manhattan. And I'm wanting to question Resolution 090319-B that had an expiration of its requirements of 1 December of this year. Having driven past the building, someone has removed all the copper coils from all the air conditioning units at the rear of the building. They're non-functional, and everything is scattered along the back. Windows at the timeout corner are still broken and have no plywood over them, like the ones that you can see from the parking lot. Driving through the parking lot, you can see that the interior is still a complete disaster. Furniture piled up, it hasn't been cleaned. Just curious what action will actually been taken. And secondly, there's a structure at 420 Tuttle Creek Boulevard that the fire department declared a total loss back in December of 2018. It's been boarded up ever since then. Kind of an eyesore, and it's right on Tuttle Creek Boulevard. Everybody can see it as they're coming in or going out of town. Just curious, what would be done about that building? Would be treated the same as the one at 3003 Anderson. So all I had was for a few questions. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners.
Okay. Yeah, we discussed that in the meeting beforehand, and we'd be glad to get some information out on that. I think we've got pretty straightforward, at least on the first one you asked, it's pretty straightforward. The second one we'll have to check with the fire chief. Anyone else, please? Seeing no one, we'll close the public comment period and move to item 3, which is commissioner comments. We can start with Linda, if you've got.
Other than to ask the city manager to recap any flood-related issues on our agenda tonight.
Okay.
Just a reminder, the mayor's lighted holiday Christmas parade, is this Friday. Looks like the weather's gonna be good, so you might wanna turn out for that. And I think Saturday, you can cut a Christmas tree down. Parks and Rec is sponsoring that, and that's always a great event, and get some real Norman Rockwell moment photographs out there. It's been quite entertaining the past few years doing that, so I recommend you, take some time to do both of those this week.
Yeah, I'd just kind of highlight some of the things that have been going on in the city, which just show how vital the city is. And we had a Christmas tree judging last week and did real well to raise some money for a worthy cause. And then we had, on Friday, we had the lighting that Wynn has described. And for me, that event was really something, not only for the great way that it was put on, but for the people who showed up. If you recall, it was raining and not too warm, and We had that whole thing filled all the way from kind of behind Radina's all the way to the north to the Flint Hills Discovery Center. And this reminded me of the turnout that we got for Veterans Day when it was freezing cold and still had people lined up in the streets as we came down points. And Wynn has assured me we'll have fire engine number 1 going strong this time, so hopefully we'll be able to see everybody on this parade. So that'll be at 5:30, and then at 7 o'clock we'll be up in Triangle Park, and kids will get a chance to see Santa Claus up there, and we'll have a choral group, and President Myers will speak. Ed Klimak will be the master of ceremonies up there. We've got a brand new tree, thanks to Eddie Estes and the Forestry Department, a 18-foot Colorado blue spruce, if I remember. So that was, you remember the old one blew down, and so we've got a brand new tree. Hopefully that thing will thrive in that area. So it'll be a great time, and I know the kids always enjoy seeing Santa Claus up there. Then on Saturday morning, we'll have breakfast at Santa at the Flint Hills Discovery Center, and then the following Saturday as well. So plenty of things for everybody to do. And what we're trying to do is encourage the idea that Manhattan is the place to come for the holidays. So starting with really the event last Friday, continuing on into the new year, there'll be something every weekend for people to do here. And particularly with those lights that have come on, not only the ones down on where the businessmen and volunteers have done down at Blue Earth Plaza, but continuing up to Johnny Caw and then into Aggieville. I think everybody will have a real enjoyable time. So encourage everybody to come out and shop local. Item number 4 is consent agenda. These are the items that we've either had on our plate before or are administrative in nature. And generally speaking, we approve them all in a group, but any commissioner is able to move those items onto the, either discuss them here or move them onto the last agenda item under general agenda. So at this time, ask if there's any discussion on the consent agenda.
I just have 2 comments. Item G is gonna change the adoption fee at the animal shelter, and I'm happy to see that. And also the time that the animals will be there. They can be adopted after 3 days. And for those of you that aren't aware, of course, it costs a little bit of money to run the animal shelter. The longer the animals are there, the more expense. And I think, over the past year, management's done a great job of, improving what goes on, down there. And they had a great event, that was Black Fur Day on Saturday. I think 14, 15 cats got adopted. I thought that was great. And having great turnover there, and I think this is going to help with shelter operations. And a reminder: if you have a pet in the city, there is a license requirement. It's $10. I think that's the lowest amount, and it covers the rabies, and you need to get that taken care of. But that money goes directly to supporting the animal shelter, which is very important. Then the other item is item P, which is the design for the community house renovation. That's something I've been personally interested in for about the past 5 years, to get that building repurposed, and I think that's coming along real well. It's gonna become again a very nice asset for the community. And if you've looked at the Manhattan Business Quarterly, they had a nice article on it with full pictures and things if you want to see what that's going to look like. But I think that's going to be a very well done project when it's completed, and the good news is that'll put that building back on the tax rolls, which will be a real asset to the city.
We'll now turn from commissioner comment on the consent agenda to public comment. So if anyone wishes to comment on any item on the consent agenda, we'd ask you to come forward now and let us know what your interests are. All right, seeing no, and we'll come back to the commission. If there's no further comment, we can entertain a motion.
I have no further comments, but I would move that the commission approve the consent agenda as distributed.
Second.
You call the roll, please.
Mayor Dotson,
Yes?
Commissioner Reddy,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner McKee?
Yes.
Commissioner Morse?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Mayor, would it be possible for the city manager to talk about flood issues? We kind of jumped over that.
Yeah.
Are there any?
Sure, there are a couple of items that are somewhat flood-related, flood prevention-related more importantly. Item M is a major stormwater improvement project. This is to award a contract to Amino Brothers of Kansas City, Kansas in the amount of $6,190,000 to install an interceptor storm sewer that will run from Points Avenue along 6th Street and then meander over, cross under Tuttle Creek Boulevard, and then link up with the 4th Street interceptor through the gate that way. So it's really gonna be designed to pick up a lot of the water that's flowing off the hill from the high school and goes down Points Avenue into the downtown area and redirect it to Wildcat Creek, away from the that initial Kansas riverfront and downtown basin. We also have a letter just acknowledging our betterments for the levee improvement project, and those will be at Hayes Drive there near Casement for improvements to the box structure there, increasing the number of box structures through the levee as well as under Hayes Drive. And then another one that will be a new gate box just to the west of the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you.
We'll now move to item 5, which is general agenda. And the first item up is item A, which is to consider awarding Douglas Recreation Center construction contract. And I have the wrong one.
But it's worth noting.
Item A
it's been
is now consider the request for waiver of fees from Manhattan Area Housing Partnership, Lee Mill Village, Jason Hildreth.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank you,
I was
Mayor,
using
Commissioners.
the copy I brought.
No problem. It's a good reminder to the viewing audience and those here that we have moved the Douglas Rec Center to December 17th. But yes, the first item this evening is dealing with a waiver request from the Manhattan Area Housing Partnership. If you recall, we have been in negotiations and do have an agreement with Manhattan Area Housing Partnership to develop on 19 lots within Lee Mill Village. 18 of those will have duplexes constructed upon them. In our relationship as well, there's roughly $30,000 per lot that is in outstanding special assessments. They have agreed to compensate us for each of those lots at about 20 grand per lot. We'll have to come up with the remaining 10 upon closing and basically zero out those specials. We'll use the revenue we've generated from Manhattan Area Housing Partnership and an additional $10,000 that'll come from the utility fund per lot to basically pay off those specials. In addition, when we were negotiating that contract and talking about that land transfer, there was a request for us to consider waiving the building permit fees and the water and sewer connection fees for each of these sites. We did a little bit of analysis for you going back, I believe, till 2004 on all the different requests that the commission has approved or entertained over the last 15 years. There have been several from the Manhattan Area Housing Partnership who have done a number of tax credit projects within the community. This evening they are asking for a total of $95,000 worth of waivers for water and sewer hookup fees at $59,886 and a building permit fee estimated at just over $35,707. In comparison, we have had some that were obviously in 6 figures when it comes to the school district bond projects, but for the most part, they've been at a much lower amount. We clearly have an opportunity with a partner here on 18 duplexes for senior tax credit homes. And Jill Jacoby, their executive director, has laid out within her letter some of the benefits that they believe this waiver will bring to their development. I know Jill is here this evening and probably plans to make a few comments or answer any questions you may have. But she does make the comment within her letter that This waiving of these fees will allow them to offer rents at a much lower rate than if they have to cover these fees, which speaks to the point I believe Commissioner McKee brought up in terms of participation at this level, at this point. Does it really make an impact in terms of those rents? And Jill is pointing out that it does. So this evening before you is a request. As I mentioned, it's the waiver of the water and sewer and building permit fees. It's pretty straightforward. It's something that in connection with the overall development of Leeville Village, and as we proceed forward, we are continuing to meet with Jill Jacoby, as I mentioned, and Brett Ballou from Schultz Construction as they proceed forward. With that, Mayor and Commissioners, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And again, I do know Jill Jacoby is here this evening to represent the Housing Partnership.
Yeah, I have a question. So overall, with all of the assessments that we paid to the county and the $190,000 that was paid for the 19 lots and the $95,000, is it about $267,000? I mean, that's what I added up. There may have been more or less, as far as the property going into this division for the affordable housing for seniors that the city picked up.
Well, the city's picked up far more than that.
Okay, and just from the sale of it
Yeah.
also.
So we've covered specials now for 7 years.
Yeah,
The annual exposure on the specials is over $100,000 for all lots involved. So these are
just for the 19, I think.
these are just 19 of 35
Right,
that we own. So of the 30, are you talking about just the 19? Or
just the 19.
Yeah, I haven't broke that out for you,
Okay.
but on the 19, so it's a little over half. So our annual exposure is going to be about 60 to 65 grand on each of these on these 19 lots, and we've covered that for 7 years.
Yeah.
So it's going to be sizable, almost $500,000 we've spent on just these 19 lots so far.
Okay. I mean, I have more comments afterwards, but I think as far as, we've discussed this in the past, and I think there is a need for housing of this type in our community. But as far as questions pertaining to this, I'll wait till after public comment is finished.
I have a question. Is it appropriate if I ask Jill a question about the letter? I may have just missed this in the letter, but what you said you would, by doing this, be able to offer lower rents. Is there a figure you can give us, like per month? What are we talking about?
Well, in the letter, it's where our rents are $450 to
And then the
$650.
Okay.
But actually, the limit for tax credit properties is $750 to $1,073. And in our developments, we've never maxed out our rents over the years that we've managed them. And a couple of them are 2003 and 2004, and we've never really reached the highest amount because we want to keep properties affordable. But kind of the difference between us and anybody else maybe doing tax credit developments is we're a nonprofit 501c3, we're your community's community housing development organization, and we are in the community managing the properties, taking care of the tenants. We're not a big corporation that's outside of town. We've brought 201 affordable housing units already to Manhattan. All the developments are fairly successful, and we target folks that are at lower incomes. So we actually have rents that are 40, 50, and 60% of the area median income for this development, where if it was just a straight tax credit program, we would be at the 60%. So we're a little bit different than all the other developments, and our rents are a lot lower. Expenses are the same as everybody else, but we're meeting the needs of people that have a much lower income than can afford market rate units in the community.
you may have just answered it at the end, but to my original question, I saw in the letter, I understand that the max limit is 715 to 1,000, and you listed in there rents between 450 and 650. I guess my question again is, per the city not funding this project, would your rents be between 650 and 715, or like where would it be at
They
the
would
max limit?
They would stay the same, but it would create less increases in the future for people. We would be able to keep the rents lower if our development costs were lower. We would have more in reserves for future improvements, and we wouldn't be able to, you know, put the burden on the tenants. So our increases would be a lot less in the long run, and they would stay more affordable.
And you may have not decided this, but would the plan be, when you acquired these properties, to immediately pay off the specials or pay them over time?
It's going to be included in the purchase price. Right.
Oh, okay.
That'll be our responsibility.
But I'm saying if we don't fund this project,
If you
wouldn't there
don't-
still be specials to pay off?
No, that'll be handled in the real estate transaction. So when they buy those properties from us,
They're buying the,
that we'll use that revenue along with the utility match of 10 grand per lot and pay those specials off.
got it, okay. Thank you, that's all I had.
I'm sorry.
I wanted to mention also that, you know, a lot of communities offer tax abatements to tax credit projects, and so, I mean, or waiver of fees, so it's fairly common for communities to support developments that CHODOs do, community housing development organizations. So this would be really a way to support your local CHODO and affordable housing in the community.
Aren't abatements usually a lot more money?
I think abatements
Yeah,
are a lot.
I think
know
so, too.
we haven't ever asked for
Then
an
you-
abatement, but a property that we were asked to take over in another town had a 5-year abatement, a certain amount of money for 5 years. And it was substantial.
That raises the question, are these rents, will they be ongoing, or do they have a 10-year, 20-year life, or what?
Well, our rents are capped for 30 years
30
due to our
years.
funding. So we will never be able to go above the 40% rental cap, 50% or 60%.
Yeah.
So our rents are controlled.
Set for 30 years,
Yeah,
anyway,
so.
okay, all right.
So the folks that you're renting to, do they pay the water bills?
No, we pay the water bills.
Okay, you pay the water bill.
They will have electric only. We pay the water and sewer bills on an ongoing basis, which can be expensive.
So since you're up there, what kind of income do you typically see for the tenants that might be moving into these rental properties?
Oh, I thought I brought it. I didn't bring my sheet, but a single person would be approximately 40%, I think, is around 21,000. They'd have to be below that. So, I mean, if they had even Section 8 or something, they could be, you know, have a 30% rent that they would pay. And I think it goes up to about 31,500, and those usually increase every year.
Okay, and this is for people over 55?
55 and older.
Okay, for seniors. I guess that's the definition of seniors in this instance. So I was just looking on, online, and a typical Social Security check, I don't even know if they receive it at this point, is about $1,400. And I was looking at some of the rental properties because it is a renter's market right now in our community. And I just looked at one that's, you know, recent, quote unquote, been the Lynx, which ends up being about $700 on up for some of their apartments. So this seems like it would be the best direction for us to go. But I also want to keep in mind that when we have so many rental properties available also, to see if we can work with some of the things that we already have in place as opposed to building new ones. In this case, it would work for us, for the city, because we had bought this property and we want it to be utilized. But if there is a need, which I keep hearing about affordable rentals and affordable housing, then it would also be good for some of those developers to renovate some of those apartments, I suppose, and to see if they would be applicable to tax credits such as yours, or I don't know if that's what you've done in the past, or if you just build new structures.
We've done rehabs. We did Flint Hills Apartments, and then our organization started in the early 2000s with a little fourplex that was not, I would say, should have been inhabitable.
Okay.
And a rehab, that was the first thing, and we still have it, and the average tenant's probably been in there 3 to 8 years, 9 years, so
Well,
they
that's
pretty
good.
well stay. It's been a nice little property for people downtown.
I think that's good. I think this is something that we want to see, but again, like I said, since we have some of those rental market properties available now, that's another area to look at instead of going through this whole process, especially if there's a need. Do you typically look at that age demographic? You also have younger families, individuals that are coming in also that use your properties, right?
All our properties in Manhattan are family housing. We do have a number of seniors, 55 and
55.
older.
I'm 54,
Probably.
so
I
thank you
know,
for that.
I know. And I think why we decided to do this, besides the need, is we were asked to take over a property in Marysville, and it was a senior community, and it's going to be it's similar to what we're going to build here, and it's a beautiful property, and the need for senior housing here, and we decided to maybe kind of take a little bit of a different direction because of the need, and seniors can live in our family housing, but you would have to be 55 and older to live in this one. So, but all of ours are family.
All right, thank you.
Jill, one more question. What is, that's one of the things I think, at least this commission has struggled with the last 2 years, is we haven't done a housing study, and so I think it's difficult for us to know what the actual need is in different areas. So, and just when you working in this kind of industry in terms of senior housing, is there a high demand, higher than maybe other sections of our community? What's your assessment on that?
I think from some of the studies, and I can't quote you on them right now, but I think a lot of people are moving into, the next stage, and maybe are either selling their house or looking for lower rents here. But I think there's a higher population of people kind of getting older and just looking for affordable housing. So.
Well, thanks, Jill.
Anything else? Thank you.
This time we'll ask for any public comment on this item. Is there anyone having an opinion or suggestion on this? Please come forward. All right, seeing no one, we'll come back to the commission, and if there's no further discussion, we can.
Yeah, I wanted to wait till after the public hearing. This is a pretty good total cost, and so I've been having to give that quite a bit of thought. But I also know that the Chodo has a good reputation in this area, and there aren't any other affordable housing initiatives that are what I call, this is the train that's on the track. And I don't see another one coming. So I will plan to support it. But I would like, because of the beginnings of this project, where we bought the land at a tax sale, and we've had to pay some costs for the, of course, eat the specials, and I would like to ask, and I would hope that the other commissioners would be interested, I'd like, when we get through with this, and we may not be through until some more of these, there are other properties that haven't sold yet, right? These are the 18, 19 lots, and then there were 34 originally, or 35. So we still have some to go. But I would like I think it would be instructive for us to look at how much money we're spending and investing in this as to whether or not we would make the decision to do this again, buy these properties at a tax sale, or if we're just as well off to let them go and not burden the city with the longevity of it. So at some point, I'd like for us to have that discussion.
Well, it's a pretty easy one. Even if somebody else would have bought them, we would have covered the specials if they would have not.
Right.
So the exposure is there. The reason we advocated is so we could put deals like this together and avoid 10 years of paying those specials.
Yeah.
Or leverage someone to actually invest where 2/3 is picked up by an outside agency and not the city.
Well, and that's the what if so much. I'm interested in the actual costs that we've actually spent. So at some point.
It's $115,000 for 7 years.
Well, we bought it at a tax sale, so we have that cost. Then we have.
$60,000.
Yeah.
That's
Then
the
we-
only additional cost we incurred.
And then we have.
And that's what we paid the school
The
district
specials.
and the
And we
county.
have the staff time over all of this couple of years. I'm just saying, there's a cost to the city for this.
Sure.
And that's what I'm interested in taking a look at. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm not real supportive, not supportive at all of the utility connection fees, because, you know, we continually go to that fund and take money out of it all the time. And every year we're raising the water rates 3%, 5%. And that's why I asked the question, who's paying the water bill? So this isn't going to help you, because your water bill is going to keep going up. And so I for sure can't support the utility connection fee. And it sounds like it's gonna make that much difference anyway on the rent costs. And I don't think we should do that for just about any project. I could see doing it for the USD simply because that was one taxpayer pot going into another one. If we charged them, the taxpayer is gonna pay no matter what on that. But this is a case where no, I can't support that at all. As far as the building permit fees, fine. You know, we can do that. I'm for affordable housing. You know, that's gonna be something the code office, you know, ends up dealing with, but they don't have a fund that we raid like the water fund. And so that one won't do as much harm. So that's what my thoughts are on that, and I already think the city's invested enough, as Jason has said. I mean, we sold the property, realizing we were picking up the cost for all of those specials, and that's quite a deal. And in the long run, I think it is gonna pay back, because we will get property tax on it. And right now, we're not. And so that's, you know, in the future, I think it'll pan out. I think this is a good deal for both parties.
No, I think for this evening, I'm supportive of the proposal in front of us. But I think in the past, we've discussed this before as far as and fees and waiving fees. And that's probably a discussion we should have at our goal setting or our retreat on how to, what kind of method we should follow, or when is it necessary to do it and when is it not. Because we also want to approve affordable housing and make sure we're doing the right thing for the community, but at the same time, nothing is ever free, so somebody else is picking up that same tab for it. So let's have that conversation in January when we have our meeting and see if there's a process we can put in place or some kind of policy we can put in place so it's not as random and we're pretty clear about our objectives. But in this instance, because it's going to come back onto the tax rolls, and it is for a certain demographic and there's a need, I feel like this would be, I'm supportive of this proposal.
So there are, I felt like my 2 years on the commission, there were very few times that I came and was still debating on an issue, but this is one that I have been debating on. I obviously have a real passion and one of the reasons, or a big reason why I ran, was affordable housing projects, and unfortunately we really haven't been able to do that many. Very, very small amount of funding to help relatively other affordable housing projects in the community. Not the moves that I want to see, but with that being said, another very large concern that I have overall is the budget, and the fact that we are currently in a situation where we cannot cover the cost of employee step increases and benefits without raising the mill every year. And while I don't believe property tax is the sole reason why we have an affordable housing problem, it doesn't help. It is a contributing factor. With that being said, I have a feeling that a future commission will figure out how we fund projects like the Northview or the airport runway, and those largely benefit one segment of our community. I think that there's no way that we don't figure out a way to fund those. So I feel like I'd be neglecting my duty if we didn't also take a little bit of a hit on this one and figure out a way to help low-income people in our community and fund a project that is worthwhile and helps build affordable housing. So I am a yes on this, and I'm supportive of this, but I just want to make clear moving forward that unless the city finds additional sources of revenue, projects like this will not happen and cannot happen. Unless we have some kind of growth spurt and increase our population exponentially, I just don't think that this is in the cards in the future. So I support it today, but if I was in a commission hearing this a year or two from now, I think I know what the situation would be, and I'm not sure I would be supportive. So I'm a yes vote tonight, but hopefully we get something figured out in terms of revenue, because housing trust funds, things like that aren't going to happen unless we seriously consider things like sales tax initiatives, because I don't see another route. So I'm a yes.
Now, the only thing that was kind of bothering me here a little bit, and I think this is a gesture really on the part of the commission, but I would have liked to seen the total cost of the project and whatever marginal savings that this might have provided in order to determine the impact on an individual renter of one of those 19 properties. I suspect it's rather minimal, but again, I think this is probably the right gesture to make as a city on making affordable housing. So with that, does someone want to make a motion?
I want to just mention one thing. What I was suggesting was that we approve the building permit fees, but not the water part. You know, which is a compromise between the two. I mean, it still provides them some benefit. That would be 35,000 out of the 95. And again, I just want to highlight, and the reason for that suggestion is just look at what's happened with the water fund. Every time we turn around, you know, the water fund is supporting everything under the sun, you know, projects-wise, and that 3 to 5% increase. And then that is going to drive up the cost of ultimately renting. It's going to drive up the cost of the housing authority, because they're going to be paying those water bills. And when we got to take a real hard look at waivers on that part of it. The code thing, you know, not so much. So I'd like the commission to consider that. I mean, I could make the motion and just say waive building permit fees and leave the other out.
If by rule, if you want to make that as an amendment, we have to entertain that amendment first. Isn't that correct?
Motion, and you can.
You just need
For a second.
You just have to have a motion.
Okay,
And
let
then
me.
if you want to amend that motion, that would be the appropriate
Okay,
thing.
let me try that to see.
It goes in reverse. Don't you have to make the amended motion first?
We don't have a motion on the
Don't
floor
have one yet.
We have a recommended motion, so.
Yeah.
So I can just say I would like to make the possible motion.
Wait just 1 minute. My assumption was here that in order to hear what the amended motion might be, we have to do that before the motion is read that's printed on the paper.
No, our agenda recommends a motion. First, the motion can follow the recommendation in the staff report, or a commissioner can provide their own motion. And that motion is not an amendment of the one in the staff report.
Okay,
It's their
but
first motion.
But if they're going to do that, doesn't it have to go first?
The motion in the agenda,
If a commissioner wishes to make a different motion, doesn't that have to precede the one that's in the staff report?
Not necessarily. So, I mean, typically you have somebody makes a motion, and then after that's seconded, somebody may want to amend that motion. So the amendment, in this case, would be to if the recommended motion was made, the amendment would be to eliminate a
Okay.
portion of it.
So we can do it, let's do it.
Or
that
you can
way.
have a new motion.
All right, we'll do it that way.
I move we approve the Manhattan Area Housing Partnership request regarding the waiver of building permit fees and utility connection fees for lots 34 through 52, Lee Mill Village.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Reddy,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler,
No.
Commissioner McKee,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Mayor Dotson.
Yes?
Motion carries 4-1.
So now, do you want to make your,
Yeah, I was gonna die. Yeah, I would have got a second, so I was gonna.
just a matter of, that's, I think one of the previous, maybe several months ago, we did it the other way, but I don't think it makes a difference in this case. All right, we'll move to, make sure I've got the right ones here. We'll move to item B, which is to consider the first reading of ordinance amending Article 4, Section 4-205C5, Highway Service Commercial District of the Manhattan zoning regulations to add group daycare as a permitted use. And we'll hear from Chad Bunger, Assistant Director of Community Development.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Commissioners. Provide the overview of this. The full analysis is, that was given to the planning board is in your packet. We had a request, the Living World Church on Amherst Avenue, it's currently Zone C5, was going through the process of creating a group daycare center for the public, going through the state permitting and county permitting requirements, building code requirements, whatnot, and then came to the Community Development Department for zoning review, and group daycare centers are not permitted in the C5 district. And they had been a ways down the road of trying to create that daycare center for the public. It was determined that wouldn't be allowed under the current zoning. If it was just for the patrons of the church, we could have worked with it, but it open to the public was not going to be possible. After looking at a variety of options, staff settled on proposing amending the C5 Highway Service Commercial District to allow group daycares, and that's part of this analysis. The big thing here is, and here's the definition of a group daycare. Primarily, it's 13 kiddos or more during the day that they're being watched at the facility. There were other options, possibly rezoning it to a lesser or less intense commercial district. But after reviewing the proposal, the area, as well as what we have drafted in the upcoming Unified Development Ordinance, which would allow group daycare centers to occur in the corresponding zoning district of the future, we propose this route. This map shows all the C5 districts here in red. So you can see the specific areas in the community that these may be allowed. And kind of a different look at this, just selecting those properties out. So to summarize what was in the planning board packet, the state licensing safety requirements will handle a lot of the potential issues that that could not be real compatible with the audit-oriented district that the C5 district is, such as fences around playgrounds and drop-off requirements, those sort of things. The C5 district is a very broad, wide use, and so any use characteristics of a group daycare center is going to be real similar to other retail and auto-oriented things. As I mentioned, the UDO had envisioned this for the future, although that has yet to be reviewed and adopted. It's clearly a path and something that other communities allowed these uses within. And it's also compatible or consistent with the comprehensive plan. So that is a brief summary. Like I said, more details in your packet, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have of this proposal. The planning board reviewed this a few weeks ago and did recommend approval, and so that is before you. So happy to answer any questions.
Is there any difference between a child daycare and an adult daycare? When I read this, I almost thought it was an adult daycare for some reason, because it didn't say child anywhere. So I just want to clarify.
Our current regulation, it is going to be for children.
Okay,
It will be a child daycare.
Okay.
Our current regulations do not envision adult daycares. It's a relatively new use that we just haven't had anybody request. The UDO does envision that and would allow it alongside this use. But today we would have to review the request and for an adult daycare. But that is not what we're dealing with tonight, just for the kiddos.
I think churches are doing this more and more, aren't they? I mean, I think the one out on Grand Mirror Parkway, the Christian church there, has a new child care center in their church. Seems to me they seem to be stepping up to meet the need more and more.
Yep.
I thought there was a lot of churches that do this. Is this new to this particular area? Is that what it is?
It is specific to this zoning district.
This zoning area, because
So,
churches have always had.
Right. Most other churches in town are in residential districts or in commercial districts that allow group daycares. If they're in residential districts, typically it's a conditional use. So the one that
Like
you
the
mentioned in Grand
Zion,
Mirror is a
yeah.
conditional use to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Is it the Zion Church or something, but on Yuma? Is that Zion?
Yeah, I think they would have went through a conditional use for
Right.
that daycare in that church. We've had a number of them. Traditionally, the C5 district has not allowed at all group daycare centers. And so this is proposed to change that to allow them as a permitted use.
So even if we do the permitting use, they still have their own licensing process and everything else. So we're just zoning it. So it still falls on them to make sure they're up to code as far as a daycare facility
Very
or a
much so,
child
yes.
care facility for them. Okay. And I think there is a need for daycare. A lot of areas, a lot of families that are having children are on long wait lists for some of those areas. So I think there is a need, and I think this is one way to utilize, especially churches and religious organizations, which have different types of hours when they're at full capacity, and this makes good sense to me, so.
At this time, we'll ask for public comment on this, on item B. Seeing none, we'll come back to the commission for either further discussion or motion.
Mayor, it seems logical to me that we would add adult or daycare facilities to the C5 zoning district. I'm not sure why we would have restricted it, but it would always have required a fence. So it just makes sense that we do this, and we want to encourage more daycare, and this will be one way to do it.
This one's a little bit unusual too, in the, it's right on top of Redbud Estates. So there's probably quite a need for it down there, and I think most of the things that are in that district are either car dealerships or some gyms and things like that, so it's fairly light.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. I move we approve first reading of an ordinance amending Article 4, Section 4205, C5, Highway Service Commercial District in the Manhattan zoning regulations as proposed, based on the findings in the staff report and the recommendation of the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board.
I second the motion.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner McKee,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Mayor Dotson,
Yes?
Commissioner Reddy.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, now we'll move to item C, which is to consider the first reading of an ordinance amending ordinance number 7422 and the final development plan for Lot 4 Abbott's Landing Commercial PUD. And again, it will be Chad Bunger.
Thank you again. So a few months ago, the Abbott's Landing PUD was amended to allow Scooter's Coffee. It was on this very small Lot 4 there at the corner of Alvin's Place and McCall Road. Originally, it was proposed as more of an ATM drive-through kiosk sort of thing, and Scooter's purchased land and had a drive-through coffee kiosk approved. And here's the site that you see. At the time this PUD was coming forth, we mentioned to them the ground signs. The PUD did not allow for a ground sign at this site, probably because of the fact that it was to be an ATM, and those aren't traditionally what you see in front of ATM drive-through areas. But the PUD expressly prohibited any type of ground sign associated with this lot. One way we could have addressed it was with the previous amendment. That wasn't done. So we're back to discuss it here. Let's see. The sign package that was approved is shown here, primarily on, or completely on the building, as well as menu boards and those sort of things. The proposal before you tonight is to add this monument sign, or a pylon sign. It'd be 10 foot tall, total of 36 square feet of signage to be located here at the southwest corner of the site. The sign is generally compatible with other signs along McCall within this development and other areas. The full analysis is within your packet that was given to the planning board. They heard the item 2 weeks ago and recommended approval to you all to allow this signage. So to that point of similar signs, some good photography by Barry Beagle to show what else is along that stretch. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
This is a sign more like Burger King. It's just a sign.
Correct.
It's not digital.
Correct.
Okay, I couldn't.
Internally illuminated.
I couldn't find any reference to digital.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I'm
You bet.
glad.
But it could be digital if it wanted to, right? Just like Burger King could make theirs digital, or anybody else?
It would most likely take a a PUD amendment to allow for. I'd have to check on that. I'm not 100% of how we permitted those or not.
I just bring that up because a lot of the, fast food places have put those up there, which, because we discussed digital billboards a while back and seemed to get confused on that. We've got digital signing all over the city, and it can go in almost any place based on that sign ordinance.
Sure.
But that there's a big difference between that and a digital billboard, however.
Most definitely. Yep.
As I recall, this one, if they had included it originally, would have been approved because it meets all the criteria.
If they, they would have still had to have gone through a PUD amendment. The PUD ordinance did not allow, expressly did not allow a ground sign on this site. They could have skipped this step if they would have proposed it, most likely, you know, assuming it would have been approved with the previous PUD amendment. So because it's a PUD, it doesn't fall under the standard sign regulations, and the ordinance originally said no ground signs here. But the use has changed, and this sign is definitely within the context and character of the stretch McCall.
Discussion on this one?
Right.
I'll ask the public if there's any comment on this item. Okay, seeing none, we'll come back for further discussion or motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve first reading of an ordinance amending ordinance number 7422 and the final development plan of the Abbott's Landing Planned Unit Development, generally located in the northwest corner of McCall Road and Alvin's Place, based on the findings in the staff report with 5 conditions of approval and the recommendation of the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board.
I'll second.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner McKee?
Yes.
Commissioner Morse?
Yes.
Mayor Dotson?
Yes?
Commissioner Reddy?
Yes.
Commissioner Butler?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Before we go into executive session, can the fire chief maybe meet with Mr. Tracy real quickly, just to, because I think it's a pretty quick answer, and I assume the second one is similar to the fire that we had in the bookstore.
Yeah, that's correct. It's got we're working with them on that. They've actually pulled a demo application for that one.
Okay. We're now to item 6, which is executive session, and we'd like, if we go in for, let's say, 30 minutes first, and then we can come back and extend, because otherwise we can't, otherwise we'll just have to wait if we're shorter than that. Yeah. So, 10 after the hour.
And after the hour.
Did I say 20 or 30?
30.
Yeah, so 10 after that. Oh, 8:30.
I move we go into recess into executive session to conduct the annual performance evaluation of the city manager pursuant to the exceptions set forth in KSA 75-4319B1, allowing for a discussion of personnel matters of non-elected personnel, and to resume the open meeting at 8:30 p.m. in the city commission room.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner McKee?
Yes.
Commissioner Morse?
Yes.
Mayor Dotson?
Yes?
Commissioner Reddy?
Yes.
Commissioner Butler?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So after returning from executive session, and we will not be recessing again, announce that no binding action was taken during this executive session, and therefore no vote in the open meeting is required. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.